This week, we're talking about the interview process, the interview conversations, and it's also Pledge Week. So I'm going to tie the two together because I really started thinking about who do I pledge money to? You know, what are the people who are the people and the organizations that I support? And I've made several donations to the Fund for Investigative Journalists. And this has been a passion of mine, especially since around 2000 when the reporting came out on the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. And then there was further reporting in the Me Too movement. And many of these are social issues where these reporters have brought to light things about our society that have been overlooked and are now studied and made into movies. And they've set standards. I think they've raised the standards to bring these issues to light. And hence one of the movies was named Spotlight. And I really like this shining the light on things that haven't been looked at because I think that's part of what we do in reflective meditation. And last week I attended an online workshop with Lauren Kuljian of NHPR, and she published allegations against of sexual misconduct against Eric Spofford, who ran a recovery center in New Hampshire, and basically was accused of practicing the 13th step on many of the female participants in their program. And they went on to produce a podcast, and it's very interesting. It's called The 13th Step. It's really worth a listen. And I have great respect for Lauren. And while I was at the workshop, I was really listening to how she and other investigative journalists have changed the nature of the interview. And they call it the interview, like just similar as we do to their sources. And she described her process this way. She knows that her sources are vulnerable and in vulnerable conditions, and that she was in a different position of knowledge when she was talking with them. And she had her own views, but she was holding them lightly and really putting primary the curiosity for their experience of what happened. And she didn't push. And that was one of her, and this goes against the investigative journalist idea of pushing and getting an answer. She really restrained pushing and made judgment calls that allowed the source to have permission for the way they wanted the interview to go. And that became more important than getting the story. And this was just inspiring to me. I just felt the quality of the ethics and integrity and with the way that the field is changing, because it sounds very close to the principles we hold in our interview process, interview conversation. And while many of us on the daily online, we spend a lot of time creating Dharma talks and trying to put our thoughts together and really say them in just the right way, we really feel the juice of reflective meditation is within this interview, within the conversation about what happened in meditation. And that interview helps develop skills and capacities within the practice that you can bring into life. So there's two capacities that I want to talk about today, and I'm going to kind of lace them together. One is the capacity to be still in meditation and outside of meditation, and the willingness to be vulnerable and describe your meditation experience to others. So I'm kind of starting with the vulnerability, this willingness to be vulnerable, because it can feel risky at times. And if no one's willing to risk, we won't have reflective meditation practice or interviews. There will be no conversation. So there is a degree of risk on both the interviewer and interviewee's part to really go into a conversation that you don't know where it's going to go. And I often attribute the silence that we have before people start to share or voice their experience as really an acknowledgement of the vulnerability of that process. And I take that in, those moments of silence, and it's a good reminder for me that it's not just so easy to start with this bringing our inner world out to others, which is a real skill in itself. When I first came to this meditation approach, I had had a recent near-death experience. And I had lost about 6.5 liters of blood. That's about what the body holds. I'd lost all my blood and had to have a transfusion. The incident had literally changed my life direction. I could no longer teach Tai Chi or Qi Gong, and that was my primary practice. And it led me to Buddhism and sitting meditation because I couldn't move the same way. And while that was very vulnerable, it also brings me to this capacity to be still in meditation. And up to that point, and I'd been doing Tai Chi since, the late 80s, I wasn't really willing to be still. I didn't see the need for it. I had found a practice to move energy, and that brought me to a certain level of stillness. But it wasn't until my body couldn't move that I really went, oh, okay, there's another path to stillness. It's being still to become still. So I really see these as different directions towards stillness. Moving, meditation, energy exercises, or holding the body still. Both lead to maybe different types of stillness, but both are valuable. And often when I first came to practice, I really couldn't even see the stillness growing until the reflection, where I looked back after the meditation. And I could see, oh, I was much stiller with the chaos of my then life. Yes, I won't go into that chaos right now because actually I am a different person than I was at that time. And I'm the same person. And yes. So one benefit of our Zoom calls is that even while we're in the same Zoom room, we turn the camera off so that you can do whatever practice of meditation that's up for you today. Whether that be a moving meditation towards stillness, a stillness practice towards stillness, that you really have that freedom, which were we all in the same room, you really couldn't give that to everybody because it would be disturbing to have the person next to you doing Tai Chi or maybe Feldenkrais or a different movement practice as meditation. So that's one thing I'm very grateful for with the Zoom format that we have. But back to the vulnerability is that after you meditate, you may not be sure how you want to share or what you would want to share about. Like, what do you bring forward? How will it be responded to? You might feel a pressure to say something interesting or only share interesting experiences or insightful experiences. Things that would be more mundane, like your work or how you felt about breakfast or whatever comes up in your sitting might just feel like that really doesn't need to be shared or need to be part of the experience. And the other thing that I've heard from people is that each conversation looks a little different. So when we're talking to one person, we focus on one thing, but then in the interview, you might focus on something totally different with another person, and it can sometimes contradict. And what are we getting at? But it is an art to talk to each of us with our own conditions. Like, that's how different we are. Even though we're working on the same thing, maybe anger or upset, we might have a different direction with one person than we do with another because they're at a different place with anger or with what they're dealing with in the meditation sitting. And we really honor that. And that we're not trying to, again, get everybody on the same page with the Dharma teachings that we focus on. So I'm going to end with back at Lauren's principle of not pushing and making a judgment call that gives permission for the person who's being interviewed to go in the direction that's best for them. And I really hold that close to my heart while I'm interviewing. I hold investigative journalists close to my heart these days, and I hope that you feel that way about us and would consider us close to your hearts, close enough that you'd be willing to pledge financial support to keep reflective meditation going for all the efforts that our teachers put into bringing the practice to you each morning. Thank you.